Students, you must have definitely heard about some great Indian personalities, like some of our freedom fighters and some statesmen. Freedom fighters to mention, you could always say Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and many others. When we talk about the recent statesmen, we can talk about Mrs. Indira Gandhi, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, APJ Abdul Kalam, and many others. They have contributed in a great way to our country's fame and prosperity. Today, we are going to talk about one such leader, APJ Abdul Kalam, who was not only the President of India but also a scientist who took India into the 21st century as a scientifically and technologically developed country. APJ Abdul Kalam became our 11th president in 2002. In his autobiography, The Wings of Fire, he speaks about his childhood. So, in today's lesson, My Childhood, we will talk about APJ Abdul Kalam. He says, I was born in a middle class Tamil family in the island town of Rameshwaram in the erstwhile Madras state. Erstwhile means the former Madras state. Today, you know, Madras is known as Chennai. He says, my father, Jainulabdin, had neither much formal education nor much wealth. That means his father was not a very highly educated person. Neither was he a very rich man. Despite these disadvantages, he possessed great innate wisdom. Innate wisdom means natural wisdom. And he had a true generosity of spirit. That means his father was a very generous man, a man who was ready to give something to others. He had an ideal helpmate in my mother. So Abdul Kalam says that his father's best helper was his mother. Her name was Ashiamma. I do not recall the exact number of people she fed every day. That means Abdul Kalam's mother used to serve food to people besides her family. But I am quite certain that far more outsiders ate with us. So he is recollecting the days when many outsiders, that means people who were not part of his family, ate with them at their home. This shows that Abdul Kalam's parents were very generous people. He says, I was one of many children, a short boy with rather undistinguished looks. Born to tall and handsome parents, we lived in our ancestral house. Ancestral house means the house of his ancestors, that is, the house of his grandparents and his great grandparents, which was built in the middle of the 19th century. It was a fairly large Pakka house made of limestone and brick on the Mosque Street in Rameshwaram. My austere father would usually avoid all inessential comforts and luxuries. Austere father means his strict but firm dad. Here Abdul Kalam says that his father would give them whatever they needed. He would not give them anything extra, but he would give them what is essential for their growth. However, all necessities were provided in terms of food, medicine, or clothes. In fact, I would say mine was a very secure childhood, both materially and emotionally. That means Abdul Kalam is telling us that he had a very secure childhood. He had what was needed. He had emotional security, that means his parents loved him, cared for him, and he had material security as well. That means whatever he required, his parents would provide him with. The Second World War broke out in 1939 when I was 8 years old. For reasons I have never been able to understand, a sudden demand for tamarind seeds erupted in the market. So here Abdul Kalam is telling us that when the Second World War broke out in 1939, suddenly in Madras there was a great demand for tamarind seeds. You know what is tamarind? It is a sour fruit that is used even by us in the preparation of certain kind of dishes. But here the tamarind wasn't used, the seeds were in great demand during the Second World War in the market. He said, I would collect the seeds and sell them in a provisional store on Mosque Street. A day's collection would fetch me the sum of 1 anna. 1 anna means maybe 1 paisa. My brother in law, he says, Jalaluddin, would tell me stories about the war, which I would later attempt to trace in the Dinamani in the newspaper. Our area, he says, was isolated and not affected by the war. But soon India was forced to join the Allied forces. You know who were the Allied forces during the Second World War? The Allied forces during the Second World War were England, France, and the US. And during this time, something like a state of emergency was declared in India. The first casualty came in the form of the suspension of the train halt at Rameshwaram. That means the first incident that came up during this time was that the train that used to stop in Rameshwaram was cancelled or suspended. Since the train that used to stop at Rameshwaram station was not stopping there now, the newspapers that used to come by this train had to be thrown out from the moving train, and the newspaper bundles were thrown on the Rameshwaram road between Rameshwaram and Dhanuskodi. That forced my cousin Samsuddin, who distributed newspapers in Rameshwaram, to look for a helping hand to catch the bundles of newspaper. As if naturally, I filled the slot. Filled the slot means he decided to work as a helper to his cousin Samsuddin. Samsuddin helped me earn my first wage. So Abdul Kalam is saying that his cousin Samsuddin helped him to earn his first salary. Half a century later, I can still feel the surge of pride in earning my own money for the first time. Every child is born with some inherited characteristic into a specific socio-economic and emotional environment and trained by figures of authority. Here, he says that every child is born in a particular kind of a culture or background, we can say, and the child is trained by figures of authority. Figures of authority means someone like the parents who are considered to be figures of authority. He says, I inherited honesty and self-discipline from my father. From my mother, I inherited faith in goodness and deep kindness. And so did my 3 brothers and sisters. So here we can understand that APJ Abdul Kalam had 3 brothers and 3 sisters. I had 3 close friends in my childhood. Ramananda Shastri, Arvinand, and Shiv Prakashan. All these three boys were from Orthodox Brahmin families. So here we understand that all three friends of APJ Abdul Kalam were from Hindu Orthodox Brahmin families. And you know, APJ Abdul Kalam was a Muslim. As children, none of us felt any difference amongst ourselves because of our religious difference and upbringing. So they mingled with each other just very naturally. They never felt that they belonged to different religions or they belonged to different castes. In fact, Ramananda Shastri was the son of Pakshi Lakshmana Shastri, the high priest of the Rameshwaram temple. So, see, this boy was the son of the high priest who did all the rituals in the Rameshwaram temple. Later, Ramananda Shastri took over as the priest in this temple. Aravindan went into the business of arranging transport for visiting pilgrims. Pilgrims are those people